Okay, writing part two. We talked about last week the idea of with beginning writer, many kids who have trouble reading hate writing, just despise it because they can't spell, they can't write, and it's laborious. You see, writing is much more difficult than reading. Reading, you're matching words in your head, and writing, you got to know what you're going to write. But then you got to try to spell the word, and by the time you approximated the spelling, you forgot what you were going to write. So then you got to try to remember what you're going to write again, but then you can't spell a word, so you forgot what you write. They hate it. Okay. So in that case, if a kid just can't write, and by the way, I do this with kids at Stern that just hate writing, who can write, but they hate it. And I do the secretary technique with them. And then I go in the dictation software. Very effective. But secretary technique, I just say, hey, I'm going to be your secretary today, and you just go ahead and let's go ahead. You've done the writing. Let's do a little summary. Who or what did what? So I'm asking for who or what did what. And they'll tell me the who or what did what. And then I'll introduce cops. And then after a couple of days, I have them I do a sentence they do, then they do both sentences, and we're off and running. And I then add where and when phrases to it. So they don't just say, Tom went swimming. They also go at the beach at night. Okay, so they're starting. Kids who can write, I go right into starting them with two sentences. Okay, and my goal is to get them into a paragraph pretty quickly. And then we talked about adding descriptive words, and rather than using fancy terms like adjective, adverb, which adjective doesn't make sense, I just say, hey, let's describe the noun. Let's describe, well, I don't even use the word noun. I can use them interchangeably, the who or what or noun, but I'll always use the basic term, the who or what. So give me the who or what. I can't say the noun, but we're not here to teach English. We're here to teach writing. So let's describe the who or what. What kind of beach was it? Oh, it was beautiful, sunny, etc. Good. And then I can say, let's just put a word right after the verb that has an ly in it, which describes the verb. So he swam what? Quickly, slowly, carefully. Good. Now we're cooking. We've got a word to describe the who or what and one to describe the action. So it's a natural step after getting them to do the who or what and then adding when and where phrases to add that. So you now have the young girl, there's your descriptive word, ran, there's your verb, quickly, there's the describing her, into the water at dusk. Now you've got a combination of a word describing the who, word describing the what happened, and we have the phrases. Okay, so that's a really good place to be in a 60-hour tutorial if you start at 2 or 3. All right, now we move into writing a simple paragraph. Now, the simple paragraph is not trying to do an essay per se. It's really attempting to get them to get the main idea or the gist. The gist is really the main idea. Somebody did something because, okay. So Tom went to Georgetown because he wanted to study archaeology. Okay, great. First thing he did, second thing, he went and joined the course, he went to school, he did this, he did that. And where you're just doing a sequence of what happened, that's a summary paragraph. So you begin with the gist or the main idea. We're teaching indenting there. And before, if you're going to teach indenting, use it from the book. Show that anytime that's moving over, you got a new thought pattern. And the thoughts pretty much surround that, whether you indent, are pretty much describing that. When there's a new indenting, there's a little new thought pattern. And so when you write a paragraph, you're going to indent to show we have a group of sentences that have a thought pattern. So looking at A, the learn to write a paragraph beginning with main idea, supporting sentences. Student will brainstorm words and to help memory. The words will be in the order of the sentences. Now, this is what I've found with the kids I work with. They can't remember what they said because they're thinking of something else. How did Jesse put it? He said, He says, when I go to write what I was going to write, I kind of forgot it and I already have something else, which when I go to write it, I think of something else and I forgot what I was going to write. It's a vicious circle. So I said, well, Jesse, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to put keywords down to help you remember the kernel of your thought. It can be a phrase. In the essay, we do it in an outline form, but in a paragraph, we can just write the words down or across. So, you know, Georgetown University, brownstone houses, the Halloween, the scarecrow collapse, and that may be the 4 things. So he now has the kernel idea. He just goes down, looks at the keywords, and then writes his descriptive sentences. So this is more of a descriptive paragraph. Just that keyword changed everything for Jesse, because he'd get the keyword. Well, we'd rehearse the sentence. So once we have the keywords, we'd rehearse the sentence, say it, to get in his memory. But he now did not invent something else. It made a big, big difference for him in his writing. And especially when I went into dictation software, which I'll talk to about next. It was night and day. So we basically have come up with a gist statement. Now the gist should be something they can do because we're rehearsing that a lot. You have the basic and the advanced gist. The basic is somebody did something because. It's another word for the main idea. Somebody did something because. And then the advanced is the effects were, the problems were, and the solution was. So you have the main idea and then you have the consequences, okay? So he could write about that. He could basically, a really good paragraph would be about the basic topic would be somebody did something because, and then he might list, and there caused this to occur and that occurred, and this problem occurred, and the solution was, again, that's all one meaty paragraph. So it can start as simple as a simple sentence. A simple paragraph, just statement and a couple descriptive sentences, to more involved where he's going into the full gist. Now it's about this time where I start getting a little creative with writing. This is a step up, and some of these earlier kids you're not going to get here. But I talk about good writers will mix sentences up partly to make it interesting and for a lot of other effects. So we're going to mix up things a bit. And one of the easiest ways to mix things up is take your where or when phrase and put it at the beginning and put a comma after it. So rather than we went to school in the morning we went to school. Now that's kind of highlighting, whoever wrote this is trying to highlight it was in the morning. Maybe morning is really significant. Or during the storm, comma, late at night, comma, in the basketball gymnasium, comma. So we take a where or when phrase, put it first, and put a comma after it. Okay, I can, again, the best way to teach things is for me to model it, and then I'll have a child do it. But as long as we use simple terms, it's not a big issue. Where kids get bogged down is grammar. And I mentioned last week, grammar has a greater correlation to math than it does to writing. So teaching grammar. You teach grammar to reinforce writing, but you basically have to work with writing to improve writing. A grammar book doesn't help you, okay? We're really teaching grammar here, the idea that if you have a prep phrase first, you're putting a comma, but we're making it easy. Take that where phrase and put it in front. Now put the when phrase. Hey, let's put them both in front. During the storm, late at night, or during the storm in the gymnasium. Now we have two phrases. So put a comma, comma, in the storm, while in the gymnasium, and then we go into it. We now have a couple. So we take that where and when phrase, put them up front. So that gets them a little more creative. All right, now we get to the more complicated thing. It's called a compound sentence. Now here's how I talk about compound sentences. Basically, compound sentences are two sentences joined together, but they must be two sentences. In essence, in grammar books, they call them clauses, an independent or dependent clause. I don't have to go there. I can just say we have sentence one, And your left, is this your left to right? Let's see. You're reading left to right. Is this your left? Look in here. This is, okay, left to right. All right, so dependent clauses, you got a who or what did something, right? Who or what did something. And if you got another who or what did something, you put a period there, right? So Tom went to the school, he went home and slept. 2 sentences. Tom went to the car and drove home, not 2 sentences. That is kind of dependent on this. It can't stand alone. It's not a sentence. You got to have a who or what did what. Okay. So Bill hit the ball. Bill hit a home run. 2 sentences. Okay. Although Bill hit the ball, that can't stand alone. It needs something. He still was out. Okay. So this allows these to go together, but this one can't stand alone. It needs something to grab onto. It needs that sentence to grab onto. Okay. So let's practice that for a moment. We're going to make this a little more interactive. I'm going to give you either a sentence or not a sentence. And you show me. Not a sentence means it's got to hang on to something. A sentence means it can stand alone. And you just give me the sign, okay? Let me get it here. So I need your videos on so I can see you and reprimand you sternly if you get this wrong. Only kidding. All right, Derry, I don't see you. Courtney, let's get you up and running. Eulalie, Tease. Now I'm going to help you initially, so there's nothing to worry about. Okay. So he went to the store. Is that this, or does it need to hang on to something? There we go. Jen's got it. There you go. Yeah, we all got that one. When I get home. Now, interesting about when I get home is I get home is a sentence, but the when changes it. So it can't stand. If I walked up to you and said, when I got home, it makes no sense. If I walked up and you said, I went home, that makes sense. Okay. Although there was a storm. This event changed his mind. Okay, good. All right. 2 of them now. Give me this or this. This event changed his mind, although it wasn't significant. Although it wasn't significant, although the event wasn't significant would be this, but although it wasn't, okay. Suddenly things changed here.
Sorry, Steve, I gave you, it's hard to see everybody, so I took you off the screen. If you want to reshare, please do.
Okay, that's fine. Let's keep me off the screen.
Well, you're on the screen and you can see the whole gallery now. So now we can see everybody.
Okay. All right. Some
And
reason
so-
it doesn't show. Oh, I don't see the gallery.
You just don't have the paper up.
I got it. All right.
So everyone has the paper on their own screens, and now you can see everybody. So it should be, you could see everybody. But if you put yourself in gallery view, everybody, you can see all the different squares, like Hollywood squares.
Okay. All right. Susie won the race and wasn't challenged. Susie won the race and wasn't challenged. We don't need a comma, by the way, here. When it's nothing at the end, we don't need a comma. Now, if it's here at front, we'll need a comma, just like the who or way phrase. But when we've got one that just kind of hangs, we don't need a comma. Okay. He's a good boy and he gets good grades. He's a good boy. There you go, Jen. And he gets good grades. Now, let's combine these. We don't have to do separate sentences, Bill, if I'm working with Bill. Guess what? We can combine these really easy. Just knock out the period and put a comma before and we're cooking. He's a good boy and he gets good grades. Let's try that. He's a good boy and he gets good. That's called a compound sentence. 2 things joined together. Compound break in two places. And compound fracture, this is a compound sentence. They fit together. All right, let's see. So if it's compound, you're going to do this. If it hangs, depending if it hangs in front or hangs at the end, you're going to do this. By the way, this is how I teach it with a class. I have kids showing me this. You know, I'll give them part and they'll go like this, or they'll go like this. In grammar books, it's called dependent and independent clauses. Okay. All right. Are we ready? Julie won the boxing match and she was unopposed by men. Although Julie won the boxing match, she was unopposed by men. See, although is the start, right? So that hangs. Although she won the boxing match. Okay. Susan won the boxing match between both men and women. Either you're good at sports or you are terrible at sports. And, but, or, nor, or, for. And, but. He's a great reader, for he reads all the time. And, but. She's a good swimmer. Oh, she likes swimming, or she likes reading. So, and, but changes the idea. He's a great swimmer, but he loses all the races. So, but that's where I use the comma. Now let's go into the writing. So I had a writer last year named Wolf, and we read all the books about Hatchet. There's like 4 novels by Paulson that deal with Hatchet, which is he loved. But Hatchet, Paulson's kind of a wild writer. You know, see, when you're a writer, you can get away with a lot of things. He'd write these long sentences. And he'd use semicolons and compound, and he'd go on and on and on. But Wolf likes a lot of these sentences. So I said, okay, we're going to adapt some of his style. By the way, that's a great way to help writing. That's how the writers used to learn to write. They used to write, copy the classics. So back in the 1700s, 1800s, you'd get a classic book and you practice writing like them, and then you try to write in that voice. That's how they write. So with Wolf, we started doing compound sentences, but Paulson uses semicolons a lot. Now, semicolons, it's one of my favorite punctuation techniques. A semicolon is a little longer than a comma, but shorter than a period. And it means the idea continues, and it kind of gives more information about it. So a compound sentence is, she ran to the building, comma, and she went to the 5th floor. Okay. Semicolon, he walked off to his office, semicolon, he was fired. Pressing. But the semicolon means I'm adding more information about this clause. So it's really good. Like if you say, let's say, the boy was incredible in the martial arts, semicolon, he won several tournaments. So what the semicolon's doing is giving a little more definition. Compound, you're getting things in parallel. Semicolon, you're giving a little more definition. You put the semicolon, no space, and you don't capitalize the main word. So yeah, it's not, so you don't capitalize, whereas a compound sentence, you don't capitalize either. So it's in lieu of a comma and and. All right, so let's go back to the sequence. Steve or Colin, Steve?
Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could check Google to make sure there's no space after the semicolon. I'm pretty
No
sure
space after a semicolon, there's one space after a semicolon.
there's one space. Okay,
Yeah, it's a punctuation mark, just like a period.
gotcha. All right, so let's change that to
Not
one.
two, that's a manual typewriter. In
Right,
computers, it's only one.
that's what I thought. Okay, gotcha. That's what I think we did. That's what Wolf did. All righty. Now let's go back to our sequence. So we've now got a child, and how I'll use that is a child might write, like, can you see my writing passages here? No? Okay.
No.
No, not yet.
Okay. All right, let me share.
There you go.
Okay. So how I would do it, let's say the child wrote this. Yeah. We love to go to the circus. Oh, no, here we go. We saw the parade, but we missed many of the floats. Now, how that would occur is he might say, we saw the parade. We missed many of the floats. And that's where I'd say, hey, can we make a compound sentence with that? Yes. So we start by taking the sentences that he's using and say, hey, would that be a good place for a compound sentence? Or I might say, is the second sentence describing the first? Maybe we can use a semicolon then. So I can give some examples first. I also pointed it out with Wolf when we were reading. I'd say, look at his use of the semicolon here, how that gives you more information. Look at his use of the compound sentence here. So in the reading, if I'm working on this, I will point it out in the reading. So it's a combination, okay. All right, any thoughts on that before I move on? Okay. All right, we're going to go to introduction of dictation software. Dictation software is one of the greatest things that's ever happened for kids with dyslexia, by far. And let me explain why. The reason why is when you have dyslexia, which is an auditory issue, you can't basically identify specific sounds and words. Again, it's like somebody with a visual problem sees a red wall, but it's really red bricks. They don't see the bricks. Kids with dyslexia hear words, but they don't hear the individual sounds. So they can't, like, when you give them the word that, they can't go that. They can't hear the individual sounds. Therefore, they can't pick up what phonics they learn, or a lot of kids will pick up phonics just naturally. My son George did. He basically just figured it all out himself by watching the patterns. Well, the E makes that long, et cetera, et cetera. My other son needed specific teaching in that area because he had some auditory issues. Again, kids with auditory issues, they will be noticeable early on because they will have trouble with rhymes and they'll say words incorrectly, like volcano will be locano. Tornado might be vornado. I mean, they just kind of make things up. So the key thing is we need to basically break things down because of their auditory issues that they are having, okay? And the problem is, since they can't read in first grade, second, third, every year they're falling behind thousands of words that aren't being logged into their sight word. plus they're not writing the sentence. So they're following the back multiple grade levels in sentence structure. So they can't spell, they can't write, and they're not used to holding the ideas. It's a problem. So dictation software, suddenly you got this fifth grader who is a start to, can't spell. He loses his ideas because he can't write and he hates writing. Dictation software solves that. Now the kid doesn't think it will, so you need to know that. The kids initially say, this doesn't work for me. Well, the reason is they talk too quickly, or they used older software, but the software is getting more sophisticated. The Google Word basically is good. Word has great speech software. All the programs now have great speech software that don't need practice with your voice. So here is the deal. You just need to follow a few steps and they will be very successful. So I had a kid who would not write. And in a couple days, we got him writing, and we got him writing a few sentences. And after about 7-8 weeks, he was writing a Whopper burger through dictation. It's pretty impressive. So let's look at the steps for this. What's beautiful about it is it helps both spelling and writing. I mean, you just can't cover that much ground in that short a time. One of the kids I taught writing, again, wouldn't write, and he hated writing. And I said, what if I can raise your spelling and your writing 4 grade levels in 2 days? Would you do it? He said, yeah. So I went ahead and I used these steps. Let me go to the steps now. First, we worked on a good sentence. So we started like if we were doing something we just read, we worked out a good sentence, maybe one with a couple prepositions like Pep went to Georgetown University and he studied archaeology. Kid can't spell it, let alone remember that. Okay. So we then practice it, and then I have them speak into the microphone and we figure out their pace. Now, the interesting thing is these dictation software has improved so much, it now will go with a faster or slower pace. It used to, if you went a little fast, would slur it. If you went slow, it separated it. But now, pretty much, it adjusts your pace. But we look to see what the child does to see what it does with its pace. So we first get a good sentence, we practice out loud. We then figure out our pace. They say the sentence and then correct it with dictation or writing. So they'll say, Pep Baker went to Georgetown University and took an archaeology class. Well, after a day of that or 2 days, I looked at this kid I was working with and I said, okay, number one, let's look at your writing. Is that writing more like compared to your other writing? You see that this is several grade levels high? And he said, yeah. And I said, can you spell archaeology? He said, no. I said, how about Georgetown? Those are 7th, 8th grade words. Archaeology is a high school word. So is it fair to say you improved 4 grade? And he totally agreed. And we were off and running. I never had to fight him on this. And it is that effective. I mean, the results are pretty amazing. Now, so first we work out the sentence, we practice aloud. We then see, now he dictated it pretty well, so it caught it. But the big issue now is they can talk too soft, in which case it won't pick out the words. Or if they talk really fast, they'll slur the words. So that's where we got to figure out the pace. And see, that's why kids think it doesn't work, because nobody commented on that. All right, so we got them saying it, then we correct it. Now, for a paragraph, students recite 2 sentences and check their writing. Students who have trouble remembering should begin by writing a keyword or 2 for each sentence. I'd go more than that, who have trouble. I just say, have them jot down for a paragraph a word or 2 for each sentence so that they've got that there. Because it was so miraculous with the student I worked with. What happened once we jotted down? Because he's the kid who said, well, I never write what I think I'm going to write. I'm going to write something and I write something else. And everyone just thinks in the attention deficit, I think it's just he's so smart. He's constantly making different connections. So writing the couple words down, then looking at it in dictation worked. And then we check all sentences using cops. So we first explain why it's so powerful. Like, you're in 8th grade, okay, and your reading was around 3rd. So there's all these words and all this writing you missed, and it'll take 4 years to catch up your spelling and writing. But you know what? We can catch it in a day or two. You willing to work with me on this? It's hard to say no to that. Okay, then you prove it. But you got to make sure that the kid you've got the right pace of speech and he's saying it clearly, so he's successful pretty quickly. And let's say he blows it initially, I'll just give him, I'll point it out. I said, you got a couple words right. Here's why you had trouble. You slurred your words. Let's try it again with me. Now let's say it. See how well it did? You just got to prove it to him. Okay. And then what I do is, like I said, after that first sentence, I'll say, hey, you use some big words here. Look in the text, use some big words. Okay. He was walking down the Georgetown street and a scarecrow attacked him. Let's practice with me now. Let's say that. Notice it has scarecrow, Georgetown, attacked. All those are hard words, 5th, 6th grade higher. You're already improving on your writing and spelling. So this, I'll be honest, has worked with every kid I've worked with on it. The problem is some kids aren't willing to do it. So I have an open invitation at Stern for students to do it. And I've worked with a couple, but not a lot of takers at this point. Next year, we're going to push it harder. The high school person feels absolutely that this is the way to go, but the kids are resistant to it. But that's not my job. He's got to get them interested, and then I can take the ball from there. So now if you've got a writer who's going through the basic reading course, let's say a start 3, and you get to here, the writing a simple paragraph, compound, complex, and this dictation software, you've done a great job. A great job. Okay. Now, if you get a start 4, you might quickly begin here and in a day or two start adding here and then writing a gist statement and supporting points and get into this pretty quickly. And then maybe you'll in a month be able to get into essays. That's what I'll be talking about our next session. There's 3 types of essays. There's the Hamburger. Oh, dog. All right. I'm going to show that to you. So the Hamburger is where you have a top bun. And that's your topic sentence or gist statement. And then you have supporting points and you have a conclusion. We'll talk about that next week. And San Francisco is a great place to live. It has incredible sports teams, great restaurants, and wonderful nightclubs. Move to San Francisco. Now, the Whopper burger is when you're now adding backups to these points. So you'll have a backup here, a backup here, and then you'll have another one. You'll have a backup here, a backup here. Then you have another one, a backup here, a backup here, and then you'll have your bottom bun. Conclusion. San Francisco is a great city to live in. It's got great sports teams. The Warriors are incredible and are in the playoffs. The Giants have won a couple of World Series. Got great restaurants. North Beach has Italian food, Chinatown, lots of Chinese food, and neat nightclubs down on in North Beach. There's a lot of dance clubs, and there's an old jazz club that goes back to the 40s. San Francisco is a really cool place to live. Now, when you add another 4 backups, that's called a triple Wendy's burger. And you now have a 5-paragraph essay when you add the backups. And you know, this is your opening paragraph, then you have a paragraph here, here, here. Now I call the supports bing, bang, bongo. So at the original, that's your bing, your bang, your bongo. Then you have 2 supports for your bing, bang, bongo, and then you have the 4 supports. That's what I'll be covering. And then I'll also be covering how to write a creative writing story based on the wave, where you have an introduction, rising action, climax, conclusion. Okay. That will be our next writing class. Okay, so we're about out of time. Any questions? Oh, just George, a minute with you on the group. Now you can do a group of 3 in the Detroit area. They did groups of 6. They could get a table of 6. That depends on attention, a lot of things. But 3 is a good group. 6 is a little more unwieldy. But in which case, if you have 6, you have 2 people sharing a board. Okay. And, you know, you basically, when you say the sounds, they're all pointing. They can alternate pointing, or they each can have a board. So they point, and then I show my board and I point. Okay. I do the new concept from my board. And then I will say syllables, and they can alternate building it on their board. And then I can build the reading. Okay. Spelling, they can just write. And then reading, I can do pressure release. So in the class, see, I'm sitting across from them. They're across from me. So, and with this pressure release, it's very simple. When the first kid reads, he makes a mistake, I point, okay? And second mistake, I point, he sounds it out, and I take over. Then I go to the next kid, and I point where he's to start. He reads, when he makes a struggle, I point, and then takes over. Then the next one, point. If a child's a little bashful, I'll only point out one mistake and take over. Okay. Usually in groups, they're not as worried. A group of 6, they may. If a group of 6, I may only point once and take over. With one kid, it's never a problem. But with 3, it may not be a problem. The 2, I just will do that. But anyway, I point. I take over reading. The whole group reads with me. Then I go to the next kid. He makes an error. I point. Next kid doesn't make any error. So I just take over and everyone reads with me. And then I go, and then we go back around. Then if I have 6, I have them partner up and alternate reading sentences to each other. And I listen in. Or I have 2-on-2 reading in a 2-inch voice. 2-inch voice is up, it's the hand in 2 inches. It's not a 4-inch voice, 4-inch voice, it's a 2-inch voice. So they're reading 2-inch voices, and I lean in and listen to as they're reading. So we can do a form of pressure release, okay? We can do a form of them reading in partners, which makes them more engaged, or they read silent to themselves in a 2-inch voice, and I'll spread them out. Now, if you're doing board work with the class and you're just doing reading, I would just maybe go right to the board and build some words, or use words in quotes to practice nonsense words, and then go into reading the words of the book. Now, reading the words of the book, I have kids alternate. So if I have 3 kids, each would alternate reading a word. Okay. Then each would read a phrase. And then we get into the book where I do pressure release. Makes 1 or 2 errors, I take over, 1 or 2 errors. And then after we read a bit, I'll say, since there's 3 of them, I'll say, let's do the whisper. Or I'll say, let's partner read, and I become the kid's partner. And I'll usually start with the weakest one, and the other one has a partner. So I get 1-on-1, then I switch and I get another kid 1-on-1 where they get a partner. So those are things I do for a group. Any questions on that, George? Does that make sense? Great. All right. Good session. Steve, when are our next one? Are we doing it next week?